Well, that was great. I don't know about you, but Scott sure scared me with the fact that quantum computing can break all our crypto systems. That's pretty scary stuff. So, but good to know that people are working on that problem before it happens. So, I'd now like to bring up our next panel. Let's see, we've got everybody here. The Innovation in Tourism and Smart Cities. Dr. David Metcalf will be our moderator for the panel. David's the director of the Mixed Emerging Technology Integration Lab, METL, at the University of Central Florida's Institute for Simulation and Training. He combines his skills as a researcher on emerging technology with his background as an entrepreneur, investor, executive, and board member, providing a unique perspective on how technology is changing the face of education, business, health, and society. His personal mission is inspiring innovation, and his current areas of research focus include blockchain, augmented reality, Internet of Things, cybersecurity, mobile for enterprise systems, and transmedia for advanced simulations and e-learning. So let's welcome David Metcalf and the panel.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Well, it's great to be here with you again. I'd like to invite our panelists to come up too. Eric Kant and Mark Watson. We do have an apology from Roy Dotson from the Secret Service. As many of you know, too, the Vice President was in town today, so it was all hands on deck for protection detail. But I'm going to do my best to fill in for some of the work that we've been doing together in another area of innovation in tourism, too, and that's in cybersecurity. So, and then we'll be followed by Eric Kant and Mark Watson, too. So welcome again, and I'd like to go ahead and start with our slides as well, too. One of the projects we've been working on very closely is looking at how we might combine some of the areas that we have focus on, whether that's simulation, cybersecurity, some of the areas of expertise in our military and in our technology firms, and apply that to our number one market in the space, which is tourism. And if we have seen some of the innovations that come out of our theme parks, how do we best go and serve that growing innovation landscape? Now, I know a few of you from the chamber might see my slides and say, well, it should be 72 million visitors, putting us as the largest place in the world for visitors if you look at some of the other international numbers. And this should be the epicenter for how we start applying some of the great technologies that are coming out of the theme parks, some of the great technologies that all of you have, and applying that towards the digital twin of the future. One of the things that we see with the technology that we have is not just how it might be used within the theme parks, which if there's any place that's going to be done, it should be here, but also how you might take that and advance the technology for smart cities of the future and what those will look like when we start applying the Internet of Things. This is the postulation that we have and why we've been working with a public-private partnership model with some of the theme park industry, as well as some of the government standards-making bodies, and also our own DHS, Department of Homeland Security, and looking at ways that we can start to serve this industry in this area and create those advanced theme parks that are already here and use them as living laboratories for those smart cities. We've worked on a number of different studies as well, too, that show some of the areas of another emerging market that we have expertise in this area. That's cybersecurity. How can we start to apply those lessons learned in those areas within the theme park setting to combat some of the typical attacks or things that we might see in our environment? These are things that become very important to our overall economy, and also to how we might be able to be, again, those world leaders combining and forming a nexus around the different areas of safety, security, and the other information technology that are going to serve those areas. So when we start looking at tourism, theme parks, especially ones that occupy the size of a whole city, like the ones we'll hear about today, start to show some of the same characteristics that we have when we look at the city of Orlando, look at other cities across the nation too, and how we can form those public-private partnerships for a cybersecurity for tourism consortium. The invitation for this cybersecurity for tourism consortium for the vendor community will strengthen what is already there from the government, from places like IAPA, which have relocated to Orlando in the past 2 years, and puts a major footprint for the largest association for theme parks and attractions right squarely in our backyard. And how do we start to serve, with my UCF hat on for a minute, through a public, nonprofit university, all of these different constituents in industry to bring academia, industry, government together to create and unify this point that we should be world leaders in, with the number one tourist destination in the world. UCF brings a number of different components to the table in terms of test beds, anything from living laboratories like an intelligent home or hotel room, to some of the latest thinking in terms of transportation and connected vehicles and autonomous vehicles, and many of the technologies that you guys have produced in augmented virtual reality, and the ability to tie those together with our now 4-time award-winning cybersecurity and cyber defense team at UCF, too. All of these components, along with our faculty, are things that are available to all of you as we look at whether or not this is another industry segment that many of you who have traditionally worked within military and government or worked within the technology sector can come together and rally around. So we're excited about the way that this collaborative research and development and the frameworks could come together and start to advance the state of the art in these areas. What I'd love to do now is to make sure we have plenty of time for our other two panelists, and also to introduce them, and for your questions too. As we do that, I know we talked about it earlier, but a number of you were here last year, so let me see a show of hands again. So what a difference a year makes, right, Mayor? We were preparing for Irma beating down our doors too. And part of what I want to share with you today is some of the things that were going on behind the scenes during that same time frame last year, this time. And one of the people that I got introduced to a few months before that, and I saw doing some incredible things with technology, particularly the digital twin and how it might serve in first responder situations, is Eric Cant. I'm going to invite Eric up in just a minute, too, to talk about the connection that his family has historically, owning and managing Coney Island in New York, and how he's applied that to some of the things that are in this market and markets around the globe for the next generation of first responders in an IoT, an Internet of Things setting, and how digital twins were created nearly on the fly for for all three, for Harvey, Irma, and then Maria to serve our neighbors in Puerto Rico and tie those components together. So with that, I'd like to bring up Eric Cant to present to you for a few minutes on some of the things that were going on and some of the technologies that he brought to bear to try and help our citizens here in Florida as we faced hurricanes and the digital twin of disaster. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, David. Is this the clicker? I'd like to thank the mayor and her team for having me speak today, especially David and UCF. It's a real privilege to be here. Public safety and tourism are intimately intertwined. Right? People don't want to vacation where they don't feel safe. Also, when you have all these tourists coming to your location, they do not leave the rest of their lives at home, and they bring those problems with them. So public safety is a problem in perception for them coming, and also while they're here, how to keep them safe. David did not elaborate onto my background too much. I grew up in a family business running an amusement park in New York that had about 2 million visitors a year, that allowed me to intimately understand interdependencies. And in the disaster public safety world, interdependencies, in my mind, is one of the most critical components that digital twins can allow you to uncover. And these are deep interdependencies that don't always seem like they may apply. An example is an earthquake in California stops diapers from maybe delivering to the Northeast. That has a cascading effect. Or cybersecurity that we talk about can create all sorts of interdependencies that we don't realize in all sorts of terms. Back in the day here at the amusement park, a lot of things were not interdependent, but we were very dependent on power. And as many of you know, in big cities, we would get brownouts and have people stuck on rides, or rides would not work because of that. And we ended up putting in generators to solve that problem. But it allowed me to understand the difficulties of serving a tourist industry, because as many of you know, we have a 100-day season. Down here, thank God we don't. If we didn't make our revenue in those 100 days, it was very difficult to live come wintertime. My background is also from about 10 years in Osceola County Fire Rescue, where I worked fire rescue and emergency management. Not thinking completely through, but one of the slides from that time is in the late 90s, we did pen-based EMS data collection in Osceola County, if you can believe that. I believe they're still doing it today. That 12-lead, electrocardiograms, cardiac, were sensors that we would plug into a tablet, and the tablet would actually read the 12-lead for us and analyze it. And while we paramedics were all trained in 12-lead analysis, we didn't have to do it on a daily basis. And back then, we were trying to cut down door-to-drug time for TPA. For those of you, clot busters, you come in, saves you from your heart attack. That's what we were trying to solve. But if you look at it, the digital twin technology, the sensors, the analysis, it's been going on for a long time. One of the things I was privileged enough to be invited up to because of the work I was doing down here in Osceola County, and if you guys remember the Florida night of tornadoes and the wildfire seasons there at the end of the year, we became pretty popular, and I was honored and privileged to be invited up to build out the command and control system for 9/11. And their complete EOC was destroyed. We built it in real time. But what I did was I pulled out some of the digital twin type of imagery that we were doing even for 9/11. So three-dimensional GIS, which I'll talk about a little bit more. The plume modeling, modeling the debris and the toxins coming off of the pile, right, or the World Trade Center site. And then in the lower right-hand corner, we've got debris modeling. How many trucks do you need to pull that stuff out? And in the middle there is all the fires that were burning underneath the debris. And so this is 2001, and I would say when you look at the definition of digital twin, this is a digital twin trying to see through the fog of war and a disaster. So David was talking about last year some of the work we've done, work we did around the hurricanes here. We were privileged enough to work with the International Association of Emergency Managers and develop a portal to share real-time situational awareness information, right? To me, digital twin and situational awareness are synonymous. It's the same thing. If I want to be situationally aware in the command center, and Mayor, I know you've sat in a command center, all those screens are trying to show you what's going on in the real world so you can make a decision. It's a digital twin, essentially, trying to cut through that fog of war. We developed these pages along with the public-private partnership over at FEMA, and what's interesting, and I'll show you an example of this in a second, in the bottom right-hand corner there, that is not just a flow chart, that is a no-code, low-code development environment. So we did all of the development without any engineers. Everything that I'm going to show you from this point forward was done using an analyst, not an engineer, because in our line of work, the digital twin has to happen quicker than you can re-engineer solutions. So I have a question about a disaster. If I can't answer that in the next hour or two, it may not be a relevant question anymore. No-code, low-code development requires thought processes that are different than what we see today. right? By not going back to an engineering cycle, you have to have different capabilities. In the upper right-hand corner there, this was probably one of the most premier ones that we worked on. This is showing what gas stations had fuel or not. In 3 days, it didn't matter because everything was back online. But today, it did matter. And we didn't have, what we got was an Excel spreadsheet of all the fuel that was sold in the state. But you can't use that to necessarily tell what's open and closed. And that's where we took this no-code, low-code environment, took all the gas stations, and said, if you didn't sell gas in 24 hours, we'll assume you're closed. And now we have a map that shows who's open and who's closed. Is it perfect? The fog of war doesn't need to be perfect, but it needs to be better than nothing. And then we traveled through. This was Harvey, Maria, and Irma. We supported almost 22,000 users over 3 months on the site. Myself, David, and 2 other people maintained this during the whole event. Okay, some more digital twin stuff and some of the more interesting work we've been doing recently. Can I go backwards? Okay, I guess not. Let's play we can go backwards? Thank you. One more if you would. And one more back. Oh, that's forward, that's okay. More examples. So again, no engineering here. What you're looking at is 3-dimensional GIS. So this is not built in a cartoon environment. This is not a video game. You're actually looking at a geographical information system. This is currently used by a number of customers, including our military, to do all sorts of mission planning and other elements. And you're seeing multiple technologies layered in a GIS world. GIS is Geographical Information Systems. In essence, it's tying the real world to your digital twin space. And I know we've been talking about products, but doing this for large areas. And you can see here some plume modeling for IEDs or some chemical modeling. If you'd move to the next slide, or I guess I can. And we'll just let the video play here in a second because I've got these in a quick video here. So here's our Maria portal. All this was automated using a no-code, low-code development environment. Power statuses. This was done using screen scraping and other techniques. The gas status. No-code, low-code development environment. Here we're training a machine learning algorithm. And when I want to add other decisions or other support, it's basically pull the box over, drag it over, configure it, and click play. These are programs. When I click play on this, this will actually run in the real world. And then we can inject it into GIS environments like this. The green circles are another product that I work with. It turns any cell phone or camera into a radiological detector. It's an algorithm that does that and turns it into a sensor. Here we're doing modeling for evacuations of an IED on the mall. Plume modeling for chemical plumes. Modeling people on how long it takes to get them on buses and evacuate them. Or forward operating bases in foreign lands. Or like in Las Vegas, modeling sniper locations. Everything in red, everything in green, the sniper can hit. Everything in red, he can't. And these are full GIS environments that also apply to smart cities. So you can take these, bring them in, and add other analysis like traffic pattern matching or other capabilities. The specialty about this is that it's all based in the real world. So I can't even add a model to this unless I station it somewhere in the real world, unlike a lot of the cartoon. And I don't mean cartoon disparagingly, but I mean the spaces where you work in video games as opposed to something that's real. So I'll give you back your 5 minutes, I hope.
Well, that's great. So many of you start to see, and thank you, Eric, the connections between what many of you have been developing and how that can be translated into this use, not only for the digital twin of a city, but within a particular, adding a fourth dimension of time to that. Think about the time criticality of many of these events that you saw, of many of the things that are required during an emergency, serving the military, to building things like Battle Station 21 as well too, and then transferring some of that incredible simulation technology, which gave our sailors some of their first experience, their first real experience before they were in harm's way, and that's Mark Watson. Now, Mark has recently taken on a new role that he's going to tell us a little bit about as Senior Vice President of Real Estate, too. Is that, well, you've been at Universal for many, many years, but a new twist to the role? Okay. Some of the things you might also know, for those of you that have been to Universal, is that he is the developer of Marvel Island. And some of the great innovations there, from the Spider-Man ride, the Hulk ride, some of the ones that I know my family loves, too. And you see that natural translation between military, government, and that service, and how that's been brought to life to entertain and to, in many cases, educate people from all across the globe that come to our fine city. So with that, I'd like to welcome Mark Watson to the stage to tell us about what he's doing now and some of the new initiatives. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Dave. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for letting me play a part in this. Most of you probably don't really care about what Universal does as parks and resorts. This is more of a cybersecurity kind of thing, but I'm going to stray off into a little of the fun time. Clearly, safety and security are the two top priorities for Universal. I think our friends down the street, you know who they are. They're top priority also, but that's a satisfier. People are not going to come to your destination if they don't feel that they're going to be safe and secure. And that comes into the arrival at our airport, comes to transportation within the community, it comes into this convention center. In Orlando, I like to say we're blessed with not just one or two of the greatest things in the world, but we have the top convention center, I think, in the world. Arguably, I can say that with a straight face. We have the top airport in the world. I can say that with a straight face. We have the top themed destinations in the world. We're becoming the top medical city in the world. There are very few communities that can claim one thing that they're best at in the world. We can claim 4 or 5 because we're probably the best in simulation in the world. So, you know, whether that's the military side through, I think is it Stricom, PEO Stry, I've been through it so many times, NavAir, whatever they're doing, through the theme parks and the cities and county itself, and what we all do with cybersecurity, with safety, with traffic control, traffic management, all kinds of plays that simulations, whether you simulate how I-4 will work in the future, and then you determine whether it worked or not, whether you simulate traffic signaling, all those technologies are at play today to create a great environment. That's the satisfier. Now I'll talk about the motivator. Motivators are the things that create great guest experiences. They engage guests. They pull them from around the world to this destination. And when they go home, we like to have them very satisfied with the overall experience. That's why it's important that we're part of our community in making those things happen. I won't go into a lot of the detail of what we're doing in the future because I have no idea what we're doing in the future. But I will say that one of the areas that I think has been near and dear to my heart for a while is how we engage in our smart city, in our smart county, in the education system. I think there are 2 areas that create the greatest challenge for us in developing smart cities that we've got some thresholds, some barriers to advancing. And that's not negative, that's just that we have infrastructure systems in place that can't move forward until they're certain that what they're leaving behind, they don't leave a train wreck. And that's healthcare and education. Education, to me, the smartest cities in the future are going to be those that educate their youth to participate in a world market, period. If we're not educating our youth, and I'm talking about the people who create the technologies. You know, I'm part of the Over the Hill gang, and I'm still having fun playing with some very smart young people coming out of the greatest high schools and colleges throughout the nation who are dreaming the kinds of things that we're supposed to be helping them provide. So when it comes to education, I think we also have to look at the same thing I look at a theme park. We have to engage our guest We want them engaged. We want them thinking about what they're going to. We want them having fun doing it. And when they leave that experience, we want them remembering it and hoping they get to go back and do it again. The second thing we want to do is we want to measure their satisfaction, their GSATs, guest satisfaction experiences. We have actually an education program, Teresa Cruz, who's sitting right back there. She's our director who developed this program. It's a phenomenal program. She and her partner, John Fitzgibbon over there, that he's with a tech games company or something, they came up with this idea, and it's about taking, if you look at what I've got on the board, Wizardry, Splash Zone, Liftoff, the cool things for our middle school and high school students. You rarely hear a whole lot about fifth grade dropouts, but you hear a lot about high school dropouts. And the reason is somewhere between the time when they're greatly motivated to do all the things, and by the time they get to high school, it's not that they've become stupid or that they don't care, it's that they don't see a relevant guest experience that plays to where they're going in the future. Teresa started satisfying that by showing this is where you can go in the future. Now, I turn that image to this image, and I've got engineering, I've got paleo, botany, good goodness, art and design, theory of relativity, special effects. You know, I'm sitting in one of these things, Teresa had me, and we're talking about differential equations. Now, isn't that fun? Okay. Well, if you don't understand differential equations, you'll never launch the Hawk. And if you want to launch the Hawk, now, if I talk to kids about launching the Hawk, they're all over it. If I talk to them about differential equations, they could care less. Their eyes roll back in their head, and they're trying to memorize something for a test tomorrow. Why I think smart cities can play this is because these become opportunities for connection within the city, not only to theme parks. It could be a history center. It can be a small destination. We happen to be the largest destination in the world, but wherever you are in the world, you should be able to connect your students to the real-world things in their community and their region. We happen to have real-world things that extend throughout the world here. Our students should be super lucky. They should be motivated to conquer the world. They should be motivated to realize that they can be the best in the world. We've got 5 things I've just named that are the best in the world. They ought to be there. And we need to find ways to connect. We can do that through, I'm not sure exactly what a digital twin was. I thought I cloned my dog or something. But to me, the concept of getting those students in the middle school and high school to see and engage with their communities through, and I don't even necessarily like Internet of Things, because all of a sudden people see you engaging with your washing machine on your iPad. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about building simulations, building experiences for our young people that engage them in the kinds of things we're engaged with, so they see the value of differential equations early in their career, and they're willing to stick it out. Because differential equations, Beverly probably had an easy time with it. She's brilliant. I had a very tough time with that, but I stuck it out because that's the only way you can get an engineering degree. So connection from the classroom into the real world that we offer. Career inspiration. If you're going to, any of you play guitar in here? This is called thresholds. If you play a guitar, the threshold is called a bar chord. If you play open chords, you play Jimmy Buffett, and that's about it. If you play a bar chord, you can do choral stuff. You can play in grand halls. You can do all kinds of things. Those are the threshold or the plateau learning experiences. Career inspiration gets people across those plateaus because they're willing to pass through them and find ways to what they want to do. And that gets to the deeper understanding. Not that I passed a test, but that I can apply what I've learned in a critical situation without somebody telling me this is what you have to know on Friday. I sit up at Universal Creative. We're doing things that have never been done before. I can't tell them this is the answer to the question. What I have to do is tell them this is where they have to go in order to produce that guest experience that's second to none in the world. Because if I don't, our guys down the street will. So that's that great competitive force between us that's within this community that allows us to continue to drive forward. And finally, engaging. We have to engage students in the classroom who come into the community for these kinds of experiences and then go back, not forgetting what they've done, but using that as the catalyst for deeper learning. So we've got, you can't really see a lot of that, blending visual and physical environments. Of course, we call that augmented reality. Virtual reality is we're still trying to sell 3D glasses with helmets. It's a challenge. And I get a lot of people coming in pitching to me how cool something is. I don't care how cool the technology is. In fact, the technology ought to disappear. The technology is about, what's cool is the experience. If the experience is cool, I'll sell it. If I come in with some whiz-bang technology that doesn't deliver a great guest experience, it really doesn't matter to my guest. So we've got to blend these things together. I think, Teresa, that's paleontology or whatever you called it. Yeah. I think that's what they're doing in that slide. Limits beyond the numbers. They're standing outside watching one of our roller coasters right now. Well, no, whether it's STEM curriculum or STEAM curriculum or smart learning, we always, back when I started this, it was Mayor Hood, actually, with our high technology conference. They invited a couple of the tourism guys in, just like you invited a tourism guy now. They invited a couple tourism guys in just to give us something to do. And what they found out is we're technology too. Now, we may not showcase our technology as technology, but we use it in order to create that great guest experience. So they're in the middle of problem solving on a roller coaster. This is an energy I think it's kinetic and potential energy thing. So shaking their heads so I'm getting the questions right. It's been a long time since I was in engineering school. Engineering the future, they get to see how these things are put together. They get to see the technologies in place. And don't confuse an iPad with technology. I do a lot of work up in some of the school districts and some of the things in South Carolina. They've got a plant called Michelin. Anybody heard of Michelin? Tire technology is phenomenal. Tire technology is, it's off the charts trying to build better, safer tires for our vehicles. Yet whenever we talk about technology, people pick up an iPad. That's not the only answer to technology. We have Surf Expo going on. There's a lot, my son-in-law, I'd kill him, quit SpaceX to start a surfboard technology company. What an idiot. But anyway, fortunately, he's doing well. So that must be it because the slides are over. But I'll leave with the thought that if we're going to be smart cities, we've got to find the way to engage all of our citizens, to make all of our citizens have a great guest experience within our city. We create one of the greatest guest experience in the world for not 80 million people. We ought to be able to create the greatest guest experience for our own citizens right here, right now. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Eric. We have time for questions, and as those questions get teed up, we'd love for you to do that either digitally or if we have some mics coming around too. Think about what we've heard here. Innovations in tourism. We start to think about the number one market in tourism. We know from the earlier presentations, number one market for simulation and technology. Think about all of the government technology, all of the IT technology that's coming out of here, all the space technology from where I live down the street by NASA, that all have a nexus point here and that have an entrepreneurial spirit that starts to bring these things out of great institutions, whether they're large organizations or whether they are, whether they're large organizations or whether they're some of our entrepreneurial spirit of the small businesses that are starting, or even out of our government labs and government organizations, all coming together too. So we do have a question. Are there any countries that are significantly advanced in the execution of smart cities? So I don't know if you guys have an answer for that from some of the ones you've seen. I have one in mind.
Yeah, I don't know if I classify it by country. It's really by pockets. And even inside the cities, there are sub-pockets of really advanced innovation going on. And then you may go a mile down the road and you don't see hardly any. So I don't think I'd classify it by country, but more city by city. Right?
Yeah, when they said country, the first thing that came to mind was kind of the city-state in Singapore. Some of the things that I've experienced when I've been there to have been very advanced, and the same type of nexus around their military, their National Institute for Education, Nanyang University, coming together in a very compacted space where they have to be very innovative and creative with how they use that and also how they protect themselves as a very small island nation, as many of you in the military know, all create some of that same effect that we may have to create too. Also, they're a top tourist destination too, for those different areas of industry academia, military, all coming together too. So that's one that I think of whenever I think about that. Anybody else got another one that they think about? Here are the ones in the Middle East. I'm excited about some of the things that are coming up, like Project Neon, which is building a whole smart city from the ground up as well too. Saudi Arabia, other places in UAE are thinking along the same lines too. Next question. Oh, I saw, was there a question? Any from the audience? If not, I'll ask a question.
Lunchtime.
Well, I know it's lunchtime. Yeah, we're standing between them and lunch. But I'll ask a question, maybe for both of you to answer too. What do you see? I heard you talk about experience, but what do you see as the future of how we translate some of these technologies into the smart cities of the future? Kind of piggybacking off of that question. What are some of the things that you see that are most important?
Well, right now we see transportation as a key to, how we have 6 lanes of pavement out there that may or may not be loaded at any point in time. How do we do a better job of transportation management? It's one of the biggest negatives you find in cities. And so to me, tackling that challenge is key. And it's not just let's come up with mass transit, although I think mass transit, it's how do we use the facilities we have in place to better manage corridors. Autonomous vehicles going from, when do we get to level 4? When do we go to level 4 to level 5? I think all those things are particularly important for cities because of the congestion within just about all of our major cities. And we can't keep just building wider highways. I mean, we're out of room for wider highways. So I think that's a big area for the guest experience for living with a city. The other two that I think are absolutely essential are going to be healthcare and education.
Great, and I know you guys are having advances in autonomy from the ride experience that are translating to the roadways too. And I know later today in the afternoon we're going to hear more about those transportation innovations as well too. And I see Charles somewhere here too, and a few others that are going to talk about those natural links too, and how public and private come together too. How about you, Eric? What do you think of when you?
Technology is complex, right? And there's a lot of tech out there today. I believe people are drowning in technology. It's hard to understand. It's hard to implement, and implement it in such a way that, there's implementing it on one end where we see with Agile and startups. Then there's implementing it on the other end where you require multiple authorities to operate, and FISMA and CGIS and cybersecurity. And the gap between that is great, I think, in companies, right? Because everyone wants to rush to be very innovative, but then when they go to implement, like we want to implement in the city of Orlando, they have all sorts of rules and regulations and compliances. To combat that complexity, we need to start thinking about how we educate our children differently. And where that comes into is, what's interesting, I think, about the work that I do particularly is we look for ways not to go back to engineers and see what's out of the box and really stretch that to its limits. That means that you can't teach the tools anymore, right? So if I teach you how to be a C++ programmer, that's a tool that you're now locked into. But if I teach you how to critically think and work with technology, then the tools should be secondary to that. And I don't believe we're properly prepared, the workforce in general, to, when we do teach technology, I think we teach very tool specific. And I'm not disparaging any educational model. I just think that's the nature of it because it's easier. I can teach you how to do C++. To teach you how to, integrate that into the real world environment is a whole different story. So I believe we have to teach our people how to critically think. I think we have to teach our people that, just because you're a hammer, not everything has to be a nail. And we have to provide the capabilities to experience and do these kind of things. And I think the workforce is a big piece of that.
Well, I love that kind of the idea of high tech, high touch, and also the idea that during Irma last year too, we had a number of our students, some of the interns from our Florida Angel Nexus, which is spun off of the University of Central Florida too, that all wanted to lend a hand. Some of them were from South Florida, some from other places that were going to be right dead center in the storm's eye. I'm from Houston, so we all kind of just wanted to pitch in a hand and help. But that was hands-on, practical experience that put head knowledge to the test. And I hear both of you saying that too. How do you apply it to something as cool as a roller coaster or as serious and threatening as a storm? And putting that reality to that, I think, will train, maybe we're all saying the same thing here too, train that next generation of technologists and leaders, that human capital that is going to be required to advance the state of the art no matter what area we're into. Did I see one more question?
David, may I ask a question? Over
Sure.
here.
Oh, hey, Caroline.
I'm sitting here listening to all this great conversation and amazing innovations on collecting and using data. And who's trying to understand the impact on if we risk losing sight of humanity and humanness in all this? Do we become so dependent on the data and the technology behind it and looking at that data and analyzing it that we lose sight of human behavior and the human part of this? Who's looking at that?
I'm going to point to Mark for just a minute because you kind of answered some of that with your discussion about not losing the experience. So would you like to elaborate on that?
I tell you, our guests could care less about the data. If I had a nice data package for them when they came in the door, I'd be lost. We do use data all the time in modeling and determining what we have to do to prepare for the guests any time of the day. So it could be, how many hot dogs are in the hot dog cart, depending on how many guests came through the turnstile that day. That's real-time data that we're constantly modeling. But they don't care about that. What I will tell you is we find in theme destination resorts that these are not individual experiences. They're social experiences. Very few people go buy a theme park ticket and come into the theme park as an individual. They're coming in to spend time together. And so that's why I think we see augmented reality as more valuable to what we're doing than virtual reality. We don't want to, it doesn't do us any good to put a guest in something they can experience in home. And it's a shame that at home that they would experience it without their family. So we would like to see the augmented reality, whether that's delivered in the home, whether that's delivered at a destination experience, whether it's delivered in a regional history center. Augmented reality allows you to still have a social experience. It's still a great experience in which you can dialogue with the people next to you, but you've just brought a piece of the virtual world into that space so you can play, whether it's a logistics game. You say, if you want boring, let's go out and have the greatest logistics game in the world. Now, I'll tell you, we did create a pretty exciting logistics game, and it was saving, and John and Teresa can tell you about it, it was saving Hurricane Island. It's called Hurricane Island. And you're on a ship, you're given 2 helicopters, and each one has a different payload, each one has a different capability to carry fuel. Obviously, the more fuel, the less supplies you carry. And so the teams get engaged because they want to win the game. They want to get as much stuff to save the people as they can. They had another one that was for younger kids. It's just that we collect it and store it in a different way now, and we manage it faster. So I am not a big believer that data is our focus.
Well, great, thank you. We have another question as well, too. How do we overcome obstacles in education to get these technologies into schools to educate our future students? So, same theme, yeah. I see someone making the money sign, yeah, so maybe that's
first
part of it.
You elect a progressive school board chairperson.
Uh-oh.
Did anybody get that? I'm sorry, that's just my thinking off the top of my head. No.
It is election season, so hey.
No, I think that you still have to demonstrate the value. One of the things that's difficult anytime you have transformational kinds of things is there's a whole industry. And I went through this when we had my first time with Universal, when somebody came out with a smart idea of having streaming media. We said, that'll never work. Now, the reason that'll never work is because that $8 billion invested in CD stamping plants. Well, you had a bureaucracy and a technology that had to go through its transformation too. So you can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. We still have to educate kids every day. But by introducing some of the kinds of things, one of the issues with technology in the classroom is how do you protect the student? So there's proximal technologies and future orbs so that we can provide that link, but also secure that link, because we have to secure data for all the students that come to us. So I think you have to address all those issues if you're going to seriously make the change. Can we seriously make the change in transportation? Absolutely. Have we made the change to the iPhone? Absolutely. These things happen, but they kind of happen. You have to get over some of these hurdles, and as soon as you do, the new technology takes off. You can't go in saying, don't worry about the issues you got to worry about.
Yeah. And we're all part of that solution, too. You can't say that it's just going to be government. It's just going to be us in academia, or it's going to be you guys that are in military, in industry, that are all working together, too, for the good of our kids. I'm proud of seeing all the different groups that I see throughout the university, and also when you have the Navy days and the Army days where you're bringing kids into these environments, exposing them what those careers of the future might be and just how cool some of them are. You guys do some really cool stuff, too. So when I get to expose my kids to that, and other kids get to see that, too, that's some of what I see going on with the whole idea behind Creative Village downtown, that transformation, some of the things that are going on to look at some of the areas that might be underserved and how we distribute this a little more broadly, too. I'm excited about what we can all do to do that. It's not going to be any one group. It's going to be all of us working together through a forum like this to come together and ask these questions. So I'm excited about the fact that this question's even being asked, whoever asked that, too. A round of applause for that, too. But those are the types of things that we want to try and do. We have another question. How do you feel mixed reality can affect theme park users' experience and safety? So there's two parts to that, too.
Well, by mixed reality, we can certainly introduce experiences that I can't otherwise introduce. I'll use Battle Stations 21 as a good example. Battle Stations 21, we created scenarios to put sailors up to, you feel like the ship's being attacked. I mean, we're doing it in a safe environment. So we can take you to the edge of the, we can take you past the edge of the envelope, you just won't crash. We've obviously been doing this with aircraft simulation for a long time. And when I'm a pilot, when I go through flight safety, they don't want to test what I know. They want to test where I fail. And that's, if I'm flying my jet around, I want to know where do I need to work? Not, I can land VFR any day of the week. It's how do I land when the minimums are bad, there's wind shear, and it's a mess. And so those are the kind of things I think we can do with simulation, with introducing augmented reality into real situations. We can allow you to find out where you need to improve your own skills to be.
Well, in translating that to entertainment, hopefully none of us on I-4 are driving the way that the Fast and the Furious ride takes us, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Put those things together in different contexts as well. One more question.
That also goes along. So the mixed reality in the public safety arena is directly related to how you can train the personnel in the parks. So we can't simulate civil unrest or a tornado, but we can in virtual reality. And you mentioned airplanes. 15 years ago, we were working with a VR company up by you guys when I was with Osceola County, and we were doing hazmat drills in virtual reality. It was a big screen and a little bit different, but at the end of the day, it's the same thing. Being able to, instead of a tabletop exercise where the mayor and her team has to sort of visualize and figure that kind of stuff out, you sort of have that capability now in augmented reality. And I'd just like to add one extra piece to that. Cybersecurity is a big public safety issue. And the real problem in cybersecurity is twofold. One, it's not a technical problem, it's a human behavior problem. Hence why it doesn't get understood many places. That being said, augmented reality allows all the people who really don't understand what's going on. So if we have a hurricane, the commander, the mayor, others come outside, you can see the damage, you can touch it, you can feel it. In cyberspace, that is all non-existent. But with augmented and virtual reality, we can actually show someone. You put on the goggles and you see the virus jumping up and down on the computer. Yeah. It changes the whole dynamics when you can see it and touch it. And I think that's why cyber is hard.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's been another important component of this, too, that training in other high-risk areas, too, and how that might translate. Part of why we invited Mr. Dotson from Secret Service, too, was they've been getting prepared and making sure that the community is prepared as part of outreach through anything from tabletop exercises to cybersecurity simulations, and also what we call cyber physical systems, where the physical security and the cybersecurity meet too. It's a very important seam for us in the digital twin of those virtual experiences our guests have and those experiences they have when they're actually in our environment, on our roadways or in the parks or other places too. And how do you bridge that gap? You'd have just as bad of a day if a ride breaks down as if your digital wallet was stolen. So those are all the types of things that go to experiential and that guest experience too. Do you use sim training with team members to train for guest service and for potential disaster scenarios?
Yes.
Probably for you.
You know, we simulate all kinds of things. We also work with the local community. We work with the City of Orlando at North Campus on preparing for any kind of emergency situation within the park. So we have augmented training, real physical training, and we use simulations all the time, and all of us go through them. From the top down, we have to go through our training so that we're all prepared.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, this has been great insight. I really appreciate you guys joining us, and I also appreciate all of you as we make our way to lunch in just a minute as well, too, for coming out. And think about how you can apply your technologies and translate them into our number one industry in this market, tourism. Thank you.
Thanks, Beverly. Good to see you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, that was wonderful. I hope you all stay for this afternoon where we hear more about the application of these cool technologies that we have going on right here in our local area and all to many different domains, and also for our manufacturing discussions. So if you'll all head out to the lunch areas outside the rooms, and if you could be back here to start up again at 1:15. Thank you.